In the grand, echoing halls of the Nova Alba courthouse, a majestic edifice whose marble columns and intricately carved friezes had witnessed centuries of turbulent justice and fragile hope, a moment of searing, indelible defiance was about to be etched into the annals of history. One that would shake the very foundation of power and privilege in a city long oppressed by its own dark past. On this fateful day, under the golden glow of a late autumn sun filtering through stained glass windows that painted the ancient stone floor in hues of ruby and sapphire, Justice Serafina Calderón, a distinguished woman of 48 whose very presence radiated the quiet authority of decades spent battling corruption and championing the voiceless, stood poised at the center of a courtroom that had long been her sanctuary and battlefield. Born to a humble family in the backstreets of Nova Alba and rising through the ranks of a broken legal system that had once scoffed at her ambition, Serafina had defied every expectation to become not only the first woman, and one of the very few people of color, to ascend to the esteemed position of chief judge in this storied institution, but also a tireless reformer whose landmark rulings had dismantled oppressive regimes and provided solace to thousands who had suffered under systemic injustice. Her achievements, ranging from overturning wrongful convictions in the notorious case of the Midnight Syndicate, to instituting sweeping reforms in the prison system that had once been the breeding ground for despair and violence, had earned her accolades both at home and abroad, transforming her into a symbol of resilience and a beacon of hope for the downtrodden. Yet on this day, as the murmurs of anticipation rippled through the hushed crowd of jurors, attorneys, and anxious onlookers, a sinister specter of abuse threatened to shatter the sanctity of that hallowed space. For at the very moment when the scales of justice were expected to balance with the unyielding impartiality that had defined her tenure, Captain Julian Mercer, a man whose uniform had once been a badge of honor but had over time become tarnished by unchecked arrogance and a cruel hunger for dominance, stalked into the courtroom with an air of imperious entitlement. Mercer, in his early 40s and known for his unrelenting brutality and disdain for anyone he deemed inferior, had built his reputation on the backs of those who had suffered at the hands of a system he believed he controlled. And his eyes, cold and calculating beneath furrowed brows, betrayed a malicious intent that could only be described as a personal vendetta against the very embodiment of justice itself. As the session commenced in the ornate chamber, its vaulted ceilings resonating with the whispered echoes of past decrees and long-forgotten confessions, Mercer's presence was announced by a sudden, almost imperceptible shift in the atmosphere, a palpable tension that set every heart racing in silent dread. With a deliberate, measured stride that belied the fury simmering beneath his calm exterior, he advanced toward the bench where Justice Calderón presided, his gloved hand concealing a pair of gleaming clippers that shone with an ominous, sterile light under the harsh glare of the overhead chandeliers. In a moment that seemed to suspend time itself, Mercer's voice, thick with derision and laced with the venom of his contempt, cut through the reverent silence of the courtroom as he declared in a tone both mocking and imperious. "You think you can defy the natural order here?" Before seizing hold of Serafina's long, ebony hair with a force that left no doubt as to his intent, to reduce her to a spectacle of humiliation. To strip her not only of her physical adornments but of the very dignity that had defined her illustrious career. The sound of the clippers whirred to life, a deafening, inhuman buzz that reverberated off the marble walls and sent shudders through the assembled crowd, its relentless, mechanical drone a harbinger of the cruelty that was about to unfold. As the first lock of her hair, dark and lustrous, a crown that had once been a symbol of her indomitable spirit, fell like a defiant tear onto the cold, unforgiving floor, a collective gasp rose from the onlookers, mingling with the silent cries of those who recognized that this was not merely an act of personal vendetta, but a grotesque demonstration of the abuse of power at its most raw and inhumane. Yet even as Mercer's hand, relentless and unfeeling, dragged the clippers mercilessly across her scalp, leaving behind a trail of humiliation and a stark reminder of his false authority, Justice Calderón's eyes, burning with an inner fire forged in the crucible of a lifetime of struggle and sacrifice, remained fixed on him. In that charged moment, as the murmurs of disbelief swelled into a roar of silent outrage and the stark realization that the foundations of the system were cracking began to take hold, She lifted her gaze with a serenity that belied the pain of betrayal. A serenity that recalled her storied past, the years spent studying law by candlelight in dilapidated libraries. The long nights advocating for the marginalized. The countless battles fought in courtrooms and on the streets, where her unwavering commitment to truth had transformed lives and ignited hope among those who had long been silenced by the oppressive forces of corruption. Her achievements, as monumental as they were, now served as both armor and beacon in the face of Mercer's degradation, for she knew that the power he wielded was but a hollow echo of a misguided belief in dominance. And that true authority was derived not from coercion or cruelty but from the unyielding force of justice and the dignity of the human spirit. With a measured calm that sent ripples through the tense air, she spoke in a voice that was at once soft and unbreakable, a voice that recalled the countless victories she had secured against injustice and the relentless pursuit of fairness that had defined her tenure. Captain Mercer. If you believe that by defiling my honor you can restore some twisted sense of order, then you have gravely miscalculated. I stand not merely as a judge of law, but as a guardian of the rights and dignity of every soul who has ever been oppressed. Her words, delivered with a clarity that resonated with both defiance and profound sorrow, seemed to suspend the cruel tableau as if the very air had grown thick with the weight of history and the promise of retribution. In that interminable, heart-stopping moment, the courthouse transformed from a mere chamber of legal proceedings into a crucible of moral reckoning, where every spectator, from the trembling clerks to the silent, stoic jurors, bore witness to the collision of raw, abusive power with the unassailable force of righteous resolve. The silence that followed was as heavy as the stone walls that had long guarded the secrets of Nova Alba, a silence not born of resignation but of the collective understanding that the balance of justice was shifting inexorably. And as Mercer's furious gaze faltered, his grip slackening ever so slightly on the remnants of what he had tried to destroy, the embers of rebellion were kindled in the hearts of all who had borne witness. In that singular, transformative instant, Justice Serafina Calderón, whose legacy had been built on a foundation of sacrifice, perseverance, and an unyielding commitment to truth, rose from the depths of her humiliation with a dignity that shone brighter than any star in the night sky. Her defiant smile serving as both a repudiation of the vile act and a promise that the forces of justice would never be subverted by the arrogance of a single man. The clamor of disbelief swelled into a roar as officers not beholden to Mercer's tyranny stepped forward, their expressions hardening into a collective resolve that would not tolerate further abuse. While the echoes of the Clippers' final, resonant buzz became the grim prelude to a reckoning that would ripple across the nation, uniting voices from every corner of society in a chorus demanding accountability. And so, in that sprawling, timeless moment beneath the vaulted ceilings of the Nova Alba courthouse, where the past and present converged in a maelstrom of pain and unyielding hope, the cruel exercise of power was exposed for what it was, a transient, empty assertion of dominance destined to crumble before the unassailable truth that justice, when wielded by those of unwavering conviction, is the one force that no man can ever truly command. Despite the lingering echo of the Clippers' final buzz, a seething undercurrent of raw emotion and resolute defiance continued to surge within Justice Serafina Calderón as she stood silently in the aftermath of Captain Julian Mercer's disgraceful outburst. A moment that would forever mar the annals of Nova Alba's storied halls, while deep within her, beneath the veneer of imperturbable calm and unwavering authority, a tumultuous storm of inner struggle roiled relentlessly, fueled by memories of past battles and the relentless grind of a lifetime spent fending off a system steeped in injustice, corruption, and abuse. For even as her measured gaze held a defiant spark that belied the deep wounds inflicted by Mercer's act of public degradation, her heart ached with the weight of each sacrifice made and every soul she had championed over the years. Each instance of systemic cruelty that had driven her to rise from the slums of Nova Alba to the pinnacle of judicial power. A journey marked not only by triumphant victories but also by moments of personal isolation and the silent, often agonizing cost of defying a system that was designed to break those who dared to challenge it. In that charged silence, every observer in the marble-floored courtroom felt the bitter tang of betrayal as Mercer, whose record of brutality was as storied as his arrogant sneers and whose career had been built upon a legacy of inflicting pain on the vulnerable, From the young men of his precinct to the desperate women who had come before him, now faced the consequences of his own unchecked abuse of power. A fate that was as inevitable as it was long overdue, his past, shrouded in a haze of whispered rumors and hushed testimonies, recounted numerous instances where his authority had been wielded like a weapon, times when he had broken the spirits of those who had no voice, using intimidation and violence as his tools to silence dissent and maintain his fragile grip on control, yet it was his present transgression, this abhorrent act of forcibly cutting the hair of a woman who had dedicated her life to upholding the very ideals of justice and dignity, that ignited in the hearts of those who bore witness a burning fury that defied rational explanation, leaving them with an overwhelming sense of frustration and disillusionment as they realized that the very symbol of protection and order had, in Mercer's case, become nothing more than an instrument of humiliation and oppression. As Serafina's inner thoughts cascaded like a torrent of memories and unspoken words, she recalled the countless nights spent poring over legal texts by the dim light of a single lamp in a modest room. The long, grueling days of tireless advocacy for those who had been trampled by the weight of injustice. And the faces of those who had looked to her with hope and gratitude, a hope that now seemed all the more fragile in the face of Mercer's repulsive arrogance. And though each memory was tinged with the bittersweet taste of victory won at great personal cost, they also served as a stark reminder of the long and arduous battle against a deep-seated culture of corruption that had plagued her homeland for generations. Indeed, while the public spectacle of Mercer's cruelty had been met with a collective gasp and a murmur of disapproval that rippled through the courtroom like a rising tide of indignation, within Serafina's soul, the struggle was not merely against one man's cruelty, but against the very institution that had allowed such acts to flourish unchecked. In the shadow of that appalling scene, Mercer's own inner demons began to claw their way to the surface, a legacy of violence and a history marred by a string of unethical decisions that had been meticulously hidden behind a veneer of respectability, yet which now, in the harsh light of accountability, were laid bare for all to see, stories of indiscriminate brutality that had scarred communities and shattered lives, of petty vindictiveness fueled by a narcissistic belief that he alone held the power to shape the fate of others, and of a present that was no less damning than his past. As he stood, momentarily disarmed of his false power, his face contorting in a mixture of rage, disbelief, and an almost palpable desperation as the realization of his imminent downfall set in, even as he fumbled for words, attempting to reclaim some semblance of control through threats and bitter invectives. His voice faltered under the weight of the undeniable truth that his actions had not only violated the sanctity of the courtroom but had also severed the last remnants of the respect and fear he had so carefully cultivated over the years, qualities that, in his mind, had always guaranteed his untouchability, and now, in the face of Serafina's defiant resilience, were evaporating like mist in the morning sun. Meanwhile, as the courtroom transformed into a crucible of moral reckoning, Serafina's defiant composure, though seemingly imperturbable, belied a profound inner conflict. Behind her steely gaze lay a heart that bore the scars of every injustice she had witnessed and every battle she had fought against the tide of systemic oppression, a heart that, while resolute, trembled with the burden of knowing that the road to true justice was paved with endless sacrifices and the perpetual struggle against forces determined to crush the spirit of the oppressed. In the silent space between Mercer's final, desperate protests and the resolute clink of handcuffs sealing his fate, she felt a maelstrom of emotions, a deep sorrow for the lives marred by his callous actions, a fierce anger that simmered beneath her calm exterior, and a quiet determination that no matter how many times the wheels of injustice might momentarily grind against the hopes of the righteous, the flame of integrity would never be extinguished. This inner turmoil, a complex blend of grief, fury, and unwavering resolve, fueled her every step as she prepared to confront the very embodiment of the systemic decay that had once threatened to undo her very existence, an existence defined not only by the accolades and groundbreaking reforms she had achieved but also by the personal sacrifices and relentless perseverance that had carried her through a lifetime of battles against overwhelming odds. With every fiber of her being, she resolved to let this moment serve as a turning point, a definitive declaration that the abuse of power, no matter how deeply entrenched, would be met with an unyielding response, a response that would not only seek retribution for the individual act of cruelty perpetrated by Mercer, but would also expose the insidious network of corruption that had allowed such arrogance to flourish for far too long. And so, as the officers moved in to escort Mercer out, their determined footsteps echoing in the cavernous space of the courthouse, Serafina stood alone for a heartbeat longer, a solitary figure radiating a defiant light amid the encroaching darkness, and in that fleeting, charged moment, she felt the full weight of her responsibility as a guardian of justice. Her mind racing with thoughts of the many lives that depended on her strength, her legacy, and her unwavering belief in the transformative power of truth. Yet even as she projected an image of unassailable authority to the assembled crowd, a part of her could not help but reflect on the bitter irony that while she had spent her entire life fighting to uplift the marginalized and correct the grievous wrongs of a broken system, she now faced the personal torment of witnessing firsthand how cruelty and abuse could still fester in the corridors of power. A stark reminder that the struggle for true justice was far from over and that every act of degradation, no matter how small, had the potential to ignite a wildfire of collective indignation that would one day sweep away the vestiges of tyranny. In that prolonged, agonizing silence, a silence that was punctuated only by the heavy breathing of those who had borne witness to the spectacle of degradation, Serafina's inner resolve crystallized into a single, unassailable truth: that the true measure of power lay not in the ability to inflict suffering, but in the capacity to endure, to rise above it, and to channel that pain into a relentless pursuit of justice that would one day restore the dignity of every individual who had ever been cast aside by the cruel machinations of men like Mercer. And as the heavy doors of the courthouse closed behind the disgraced captain, sealing his fate and marking the beginning of an irrevocable shift in the balance of power, the very air in the hall seemed to vibrate with the promise of retribution and renewal, a promise that resonated deep within Serafina's soul, affirming that despite the cruelty of the past and the bitterness of the present, her defiant resilience would continue to be the beacon that guided the lost and the oppressed towards a future where justice, in its truest form, would reign supreme. In the wake of that fateful day when unspeakable cruelty had been unleashed within the hallowed walls of the Nova Alba courthouse, an atmosphere of simmering rage and electrified anticipation began to suffuse every corner of the ancient edifice. Justice Serafina Calderón, whose life had been defined by an unyielding commitment to truth and fairness, now found herself at a crossroads of destiny, her inner resolve hardened by years of relentless struggle against a corrupt system that had long sought to crush the very spirit of the oppressed. Even as the memory of Captain Julian Mercer's despicable act, an act of unspeakable evil that had gone far beyond mere humiliation by forcefully severing strands of her ebony hair with cold, merciless clippers, still reverberated through the minds of every witness, Mercer had not ceased his reign of terror. Instead, in a final, diabolical bid to assert his dominance, he escalated his cruelty to a level that defied all previous bounds of human decency. With a sneer of sadistic pleasure twisting his features, Mercer, whose reputation had been built on a foundation of brutality and perverse entitlement, ordered his aides to circle around, forcing Serafina to remain pinned to her chair as he retrieved a concealed vial filled with a noxious chemical intended to not only disfigure her further but to render her speechless, a final, irreversible attempt to strip her of the dignity that had defined her illustrious career. His eyes, burning with a malevolent intensity born of years of unchecked abuse, darted around the courtroom as if to relish every shudder of horror that rippled through the gathered crowd. And as he advanced with deliberate, almost ritualistic cruelty, his voice, a guttural snarl laden with venomous authority, declared that her defiance would be crushed under the weight of his power. That no woman of color, no champion of justice, could ever hope to challenge his tyrannical grip on order. But in that dark, heart-stopping moment, when all seemed lost and the oppressive shadow of Mercer's evil threatened to engulf every hope of redemption, Serafina's eyes blazed with a fierce inner light born from decades of sacrifice and unrelenting struggle. Within the depths of her being, every memory of hardship, every battle fought in silent determination against injustice, converged into a singular, unstoppable force, summoning every ounce of strength and resolve that had carried her from the impoverished streets of Nova Alba to the lofty bench of Chief Judge. She slowly, deliberately reached for the ornate judge's robe that hung like a mantle of legacy and honor upon a polished stand beside her. In that transcendent act of defiant reclamation, symbolizing not only the return of her rightful authority but the rejection of Mercer's repugnant attempt to subjugate her, she draped the robe around her shoulders as if cloaking herself in the power of every life she had ever touched and every injustice she had ever vanquished. The transformation was both immediate and profound, as the rich fabric settled over her, its intricate embroidery a testament to the long and arduous history of those who had fought before her. The courtroom itself seemed to hold its breath, and the tide of public sentiment turned inexorably. Mercer's eyes widened in a moment of palpable terror as he beheld the indomitable figure before him, a figure who now radiated an aura of transcendent grace and unassailable authority, defying his perverse machinations with a dignity that rendered his evil actions even more repulsive in contrast. His earlier bluster and malevolent threats crumbled into a pitiful, desperate rant as the murmurs of outrage swelled into a deafening roar among the spectators. Even those who had long cowered under his tyrannical presence could now no longer remain silent. In a stunning reversal that electrified the air, officers loyal not to Mercer but to the principles of justice stepped forward, their stern faces illuminated by the incandescent resolve that had been ignited by Serafina's reclamation of her honor. As the weight of the moment pressed upon him, Mercer's past transgressions, unspeakable acts of violence against innocent civilians, his callous disregard for human life, and the systematic abuse of his power, were laid bare before the eyes of every person present. A damning litany of cruelty that now formed the basis of his imminent downfall. In that climactic instant, when Serafina's composed voice rang out with crystalline clarity, declaring, "Your reign of terror ends now. For justice will always triumph over cruelty," the transformation of power was complete. The elegant rustle of her robe, echoing like a clarion call of hope amid the oppressive gloom, symbolized not only her reclaiming of authority but the ultimate repudiation of every vile attempt by Mercer to subvert the very essence of justice. As his aides, who had once shared in his deluded ambition, hesitated and then slowly retreated in dismay, Mercer's despicable facade began to crumble. His eyes darted wildly as he sought desperately to summon any remnant of the power he once wielded. But it was too late. The courtroom erupted into tumultuous applause and fervent shouts of vindication as Mercer was finally subdued by officers whose expressions were etched with grim determination. A band of men and women who had long suffered under his iron fist and now rose, united in their refusal to allow his cruelty to persist unchallenged. Every word of his abhorrent monologue, every hideous, calculated action designed to humiliate and terrorize, now rang hollow in the wake of Serafina's resolute defiance. The once mighty villain was reduced to a trembling figure, his grandiose delusions of power laid waste before the unstoppable force of true justice. Yet even as the sound of the clippers and the acrid tang of the chemical threat still lingered like a dark specter over the proceedings, Serafina's mind was awash with the tumult of her own inner struggle. A battle not solely against the monstrous figure of Mercer but against the crushing weight of a legacy of suffering that had haunted her every step. Memories of the long, lonely nights spent poring over legal texts in a cramped, dilapidated study, of the bitter, isolating moments when hope seemed an ephemeral dream amid a tide of relentless injustice, surged forth as she recalled each sacrifice made, each victory won at the cost of immeasurable pain. And yet, in that crucible of despair and determination, she had forged a strength that transcended the agony of her past, transforming her grief into an unbreakable resolve to stand as the unwavering guardian of those who had been trampled by cruelty and systemic oppression. Her inner turmoil, a swirling tempest of sorrow and righteous fury, lent her every gesture an air of profound purpose and unyielding defiance, a purpose that now resonated with every person in that courtroom, igniting a spark of hope that no tyrant, however evil or monstrous, could ever extinguish. As the echoes of merciless laughter and the final, shattering clink of handcuffs resounded through the marble halls, and as Mercer's pitiful attempts at protest faltered beneath the weight of undeniable truth, the transformation reached its apotheosis. The very fabric of the courthouse, steeped in centuries of legal tradition and the blood of countless martyrs for justice, seemed to come alive with the fervor of retribution. each stone and pillar bearing silent witness to the historic role reversal that had unfolded before their eyes. In that single, transcendent moment, when the despicable tyrant was publicly disgraced and led away in ignominious arrest, Serafina Calderón not only reclaimed her personal dignity but also reasserted the inviolable power of justice over the forces of corruption and cruelty. The symbolic donning of the judge's robe had become an act of defiant metamorphosis. A transformation that reversed the roles of oppressor and oppressed, casting Mercer into the ignoble role of a vanquished villain whose legacy of terror would now serve as a grim reminder of the inevitable downfall that awaits those who dare to abuse their power. And so, as the courtroom slowly settled into a heavy, reflective silence, interrupted only by the murmurs of an awakened public and the steady, determined footsteps of those committed to upholding the law, Serafina, resplendent in her robe and fortified by the memory of every soul she had defended, vowed to carry forward the torch of justice with even greater fervor. Her defiant act, which had turned the tables on a man whose evil had seemed insurmountable, now shone as a beacon for all who had ever been downtrodden. A promise that no matter how dark the night or how formidable the adversary, the light of truth and dignity would ultimately prevail. In that climactic, transformative moment, where the raw, unvarnished brutality of Mercer's actions met the serene, unyielding strength of Serafina's spirit, the scales of justice were irrevocably tipped in favor of righteousness, heralding a new dawn for Nova Alba. A dawn where the abuse of power was not an untouchable right but a crime that would be met with the full, unrelenting force of a society determined to stand against tyranny, to vindicate the voiceless, and to ensure that the legacy of defiant resilience would forever triumph over the evil that once sought to oppress it. Serafina's journey had reached a pivotal moment, a historic moment of justice that reverberated like a clarion call through the corridors of power, shaking the foundations of a corrupt system that had long sheltered those who believed themselves above the law. In the wake of unspeakable injustices and relentless oppression, the air was heavy with anticipation as the villain, once a symbol of unchecked authority and cruelty, now faced the dire consequences of his hubris. For years, he had trampled on the rights and dignity of the innocent, leaving scars that ran deep in the hearts of the people he had so callously oppressed. And now, in a stunning turn of events that no one had dared to imagine, the scales of justice were finally tipping in favor of the voiceless. As the courtroom fell into a hushed silence, every eye fixed on him with a mixture of disbelief and vindication, Serafina, whose spirit had been forged in the crucible of suffering and resilience, emerged as a beacon of unwavering determination, her resolve, tempered by the flames of personal loss and the burden of witnessing systemic injustice, radiated with an intensity that both intimidated and inspired. The villain's actions, marked by a reckless abuse of power, an insatiable desire for control, and a blatant disregard for human life, had set in motion a chain reaction that rippled across communities and ignited a fervor for change that could not be quelled. His most heinous acts, once hidden behind a veneer of authority, were now laid bare for all to see, each misdeed a stark reminder of the suffering he had inflicted upon countless lives. Families torn apart, dreams shattered like glass under the weight of his tyranny, and the slow, agonizing erosion of trust in institutions that were meant to protect rather than persecute, all bore testament to the devastating impact of his cruelty. Yet, in the midst of this darkness, Serafina's unwavering commitment to justice offered a glimmer of hope, a promise that the cycle of abuse and impunity was finally coming to an end. With every word she spoke, laden with both sorrow and defiance, she called upon the collective strength of a community that had long been silenced, urging them to stand together against the forces of oppression. Her voice, a harmonious blend of grace and grit, echoed through the hallowed halls of the courthouse, resonating with the hearts of those who had suffered in silence for far too long. In that moment, as the villain's face contorted with the realization of his impending downfall, the room transformed into a battleground of justice, a sacred space where the oppressed reclaimed their power and the corrupt were held accountable for their misdeeds. The consequences of his actions were not confined to the sterile walls of the courtroom. They had unleashed a wave of social upheaval, sparking protests, inspiring movements, and forcing a reckoning with the long-standing injustices that had plagued the nation. News outlets broadcasted the unfolding drama to a captivated audience, and social media platforms buzzed with fervent discussions and impassioned calls for reform. The ripple effect was undeniable. Communities across the country rallied behind Serafina's cause, demanding that the era of unchecked abuse be brought to a decisive close. In every corner of society, from the smallest town to the grandest city, people recognized that the villain's reign of terror had not only violated the law but had also betrayed the fundamental principles of human dignity and equality. As Serafina recounted the tragic stories of those whose lives had been irrevocably altered by his actions, the gravity of the situation became painfully clear. It was a call to arms, a rallying cry for justice that transcended borders and defied the constraints of convention. The villain, once lauded for his ruthlessness and feared for his power, now stood isolated, a pariah condemned by history for his role in perpetuating a legacy of pain and suffering. His downfall was not merely a personal defeat but a watershed moment that signified the end of an era characterized by impunity and injustice. In the face of overwhelming evidence, his carefully constructed facade crumbled, and the magnitude of his misdeeds was laid bare before a nation that had grown weary of silence and complacency. Serafina's transformation from a quietly determined advocate to a formidable force for justice was emblematic of a broader societal awakening, a realization that true power lies not in domination and control but in the unwavering commitment to uphold truth and fairness. Her journey had been fraught with adversity, yet each trial had only served to fortify her resolve, imbuing her with a clarity of purpose that now shone like a beacon in the darkness. With every step she took, Serafina dismantled the structures of corruption and inequality that had long oppressed the marginalized, her actions sparking a ripple effect that ignited hope and demanded accountability from those in power. As the villain was led away in handcuffs, his once mighty authority reduced to a hollow echo of its former self. The courtroom and the entire nation breathed a collective sigh of relief, knowing that the long arc of justice was finally bending towards righteousness. It was a moment that resonated far beyond the confines of that courtroom. A moment that symbolized the end of an era defined by oppression and the beginning of a new chapter where every individual's dignity would be respected and every act of injustice would be met with a swift and unyielding response. The fallout from the villain's reign had been immense: economic instability, shattered communities, and a pervasive sense of betrayal had all stemmed from his unbridled arrogance and disregard for the law. Every misstep, every act of cruelty, had consequences that echoed through the lives of countless individuals, leading to a cascade of events that dismantled powerful institutions and exposed the rot at the heart of a system built on fear and subjugation. Serafina's stand against tyranny became a rallying point for change, a symbol that even the most formidable oppressor could be held accountable when the collective will of the people united in pursuit of truth and justice. In the aftermath, the villain's empire of fear crumbled as key allies abandoned him and those he had exploited rose up, their anger and sorrow transforming into a powerful force that reshaped the very fabric of society. This historic moment of justice was not merely about retribution. It was a transformative turning point that signified the end of a dark chapter and the beginning of a future built on accountability, transparency, and unwavering moral integrity. In that solemn moment, as the villain was led away, the crowd erupted in a chorus of vindication and hope, their voices a resounding affirmation that justice, though long delayed, was inevitable and unstoppable. As the echoes of that monumental day reverberated across the nation, a new era of accountability began to take shape, one where the lessons of the past were not forgotten but served as a constant reminder of the cost of tyranny. The transformative power of this justice was palpable, its impact felt not only in the halls of government but in the hearts of every person who had suffered under the yoke of oppression. Each life a testament to the unyielding spirit of resistance. In the midst of this sweeping revolution, Serafina's steadfast courage and visionary leadership became the rallying cry for millions, inspiring a movement that demanded not only accountability for past atrocities but also a promise of a future free from the shackles of injustice. Now, as you stand witness to this historic moment of justice, I urge you to leave your comments if you believe this historic moment of justice, born from the downfall of a once untouchable tyrant, is a turning point that will reshape history and herald a future of true righteousness. Serafina's journey continued in the wake of a tumultuous upheaval that had forever altered the fabric of her community. A community that had long suffered in silence under the weight of racism and oppression. Every step she took resonated with the memories of those whose voices had been stifled by the villain's cruel actions. And as she walked through the dimly lit corridors of the community center that once served as a sanctuary for the marginalized, her heart swelled with a mixture of sorrow and fierce determination. In the faded photographs that lined the walls, she saw the faces of men, women, and children whose lives had been indelibly scarred by a regime that valued power over human dignity. These were the souls who had been bullied, ridiculed, and demeaned solely because of the color of their skin, their stories a tapestry of heartbreak and resilience that demanded to be heard. With every gentle step, Serafina recalled the whispered testimonies of those who had once endured relentless abuse, stories of tear-stained cheeks, broken dreams, and the quiet desperation of a people left to fend for themselves in a world that had forsaken them. Her own eyes filled with tears as she remembered the young girl whose laughter had been silenced too soon, the elderly man whose wisdom was dismissed as mere stubbornness, and the countless others who had been cast aside, their suffering rendered invisible by the veneer of authority wielded by a heartless oppressor. This sacred space, now imbued with the echoes of past anguish, became a living monument to their struggles and a testament to the unyielding spirit of those who dared to hope for a better tomorrow. Standing in the dim glow of the setting sun, Serafina's mind wandered back to the painful memories of the victims whose lives had been shattered by the villain's merciless bullying. She remembered the day when a proud mother was forced to watch as her son, with dreams as vast as the sky, was belittled and humiliated in public simply for the tone of his skin. The memory of his tearful eyes and the tremble in his voice still haunted her every waking moment. In another corner of her recollection, an elderly woman, once the pillar of her neighborhood, had been reduced to silent despair by cruel taunts and degrading slurs. Her dignity stolen bit by an oppressor who thrived on the suffering of others. The villain's actions had not only wounded individual hearts, but had also fractured the community, sowing seeds of distrust and fear among neighbors who had once stood united. Each story, each cry for help, was a scar upon the collective soul of the people he had tormented. As Serafina walked past the weathered walls of the center, she felt the weight of every whispered sorrow and every silent plea for justice that had been left in the wake of his tyranny. With a heavy heart yet burning resolve, she vowed that the voices of those forgotten would echo louder than the lies of the oppressor, and that the truth of their suffering would no longer be dismissed. In that moment, she understood that her fight was not merely for herself, but for every soul that had been downtrodden and degraded by a system that condoned such abhorrent cruelty. Determined to right the wrongs of the past, Serafina dedicated herself to speaking for those who had been silenced, her voice a powerful instrument of change that resonated through every heart that had been bruised by racism and cruelty. In community meetings and through heartfelt speeches broadcast on local radio, she recounted the personal stories of the victims, urging everyone to remember that behind every statistic was a human life filled with hope, pain, and the desire for dignity. One such story was that of Malik, a young man whose brilliant mind and gentle spirit were overshadowed by the relentless bullying he endured from the villain's enforcers. Malik, once a promising student with dreams of becoming a scientist, had his aspirations crushed by a single act of racial hatred that left him questioning his worth and his place in a society that had always deemed him less. Similarly, there was the story of Aisha, a resilient woman whose unwavering strength was marred by the incessant slurs and demeaning remarks aimed at her because of her skin color. Her tears, shed in solitude and hidden away from the public eye, testified to a sorrow that ran deeper than words could express. Each account, filled with heartbreak and courage, served as a stark reminder of the real human cost of oppression. As Serafina listened to these voices, she felt an overwhelming empathy that fueled her determination to dismantle the structures of inequality and prejudice. In her passionate appeals, she reminded everyone that justice was not merely a lofty ideal, but a right that belonged to every individual, regardless of their background, and that the fight against racism and oppression was a battle for the very soul of society itself. With the collective pain of generations echoing in her soul, Serafina took to the streets. Her steps measured yet resolute as she organized rallies and peaceful protests that demanded accountability from those who had long profited from injustice. Each demonstration was imbued with the raw emotions of the victims, their personal stories interwoven with the shared narrative of a community that had been denied basic human rights. In her speeches, Serafina spoke not only of the systemic failures that allowed racism and oppression to thrive but also of the individual moments of suffering that had been inflicted by the villain's reign of terror. She recalled the heart-wrenching account of Jamal, a father who had been forced to watch his dreams crumble as he was subjected to endless humiliation in front of his children. His spirit crushed by an adversary who believed that cruelty was a sign of strength. The anguish of Jamal and the silent tears of countless others were not just distant memories, they were living wounds that demanded healing through justice. As the movement gained momentum, the stories of those who had been marginalized began to capture the attention of the nation, painting a vivid picture of a society in desperate need of change. The passion in Serafina's voice stirred emotions in the hearts of people from all walks of life, drawing together individuals who had once felt isolated and powerless. In the midst of this burgeoning revolution, she became a symbol of hope and resilience, a testament to the idea that the strength of a community lies in its ability to rise above hate and reclaim its dignity. Her call to action was clear and unyielding. Every voice mattered. Every tear was a reminder of the cost of oppression. And together, they would forge a future where the stain of racism could finally be cleansed by the light of truth and compassion. Amidst the growing chorus for justice, Serafina organized a memorial service in honor of those who had been tormented by the villain's relentless cruelty. Under a vast, starlit sky, the community gathered in a field where the scars of past atrocities were etched into the very earth, serving as a somber reminder of the wounds inflicted by unchecked hatred. There, in the soft glow of candlelight, survivors shared their stories in voices trembling with both grief and hope. An older man, his face lined with the passage of years and sorrow, recounted the day he was humiliated in front of his family, a day when his pride was shattered and his spirit was broken, leaving him to wander in silence for many years. A young woman, barely out of adolescence, spoke of the harsh words and physical torment that had forced her to question her worth, the memory of each insult burning like a brand on her heart. Their voices wove together a tapestry of loss and resilience, each narrative a testament to the profound injustice they had endured and a call for systemic change. Serafina listened to these accounts with tears streaming down her face, each drop a symbol of both the pain of the past and the promise of a better future. In that moment, the collective grief transformed into a powerful resolve, a determination to ensure that no other soul would have to suffer in silence. As the night deepened and the candles flickered in the cool air, Serafina addressed the crowd, her words gentle yet resolute, urging every listener to remember that their stories mattered, that every act of cruelty must be met with unwavering compassion and accountability. She declared that the time for change had come, that the villain's legacy of hate would be overridden by the enduring power of unity and love. Her impassioned plea resonated deeply with everyone present, stirring a commitment to stand together and dismantle the oppressive systems that had long denied them their rightful dignity and respect. Thus, every tear and every cry echoed with unyielding hope. Judge Serafina Calderon's legacy became a testament etched into the heartbeat of the community she had sworn to serve. A beacon born out of love, sacrifice, and a resolute commitment to justice that refused to be extinguished. Despite the overwhelming tides of oppression she faced, her journey was not one of simple ascent. It was forged in the fire of relentless battles against a system that, at every turn, sought to grind her down, diminish her voice, and make her feel as though her place in this world was nothing more than the exception to normal convention. An anomaly in a world not yet ready to embrace the power of true equality. Like so many before her, she started humble, not among the threads of privilege, but from the tangled roots of her own determination to rise above the heavy weight of inherited racial biases imposed on her as a child of underrepresented heritage. Born the daughter of immigrants, she had faced discrimination from early on, subjected to the cold stares of strangers who viewed her through a lens of prejudice. Yet it was not the burdens of this discrimination that defined her. It was how she faced it that crafted the woman who would later become one of the most respected and fearless presiding judges in a court of law. Every struggle she overcame shaped her legacy. Every time a door was slammed shut in her face, she would resolutely open it again and again, persistently walking with courage, knowing that her voice, as strong as it might be, was not the product of entitlement nor privilege, but the voices of those who had been denied the basic right of standing in front of the law for centuries. Life's heavy blows had only made her stronger. She became a lawyer who defended the voiceless, those wronged and forsaken by the justice system. Every single argument, her fierce determination to fight for the underserved, regardless of their ethnicity or financial status, began to build a track record. Serafina's knowledge of the law was impeccable, her sense of fairness unyielding, but it was her humanity, her unshakable belief in the worth of every person, her empathic understanding that bound her to her cases with a unique and profound connection. As Serafina entered the courtrooms prominent for some of the most difficult legal fights against systemic injustice, her reputation grew. Opponents almost feared her conviction as much as they feared her intellect. Yet her fearlessness was not rooted in ambition or the desire to possess power. It was rooted in a need, a responsibility to speak for those who had been silenced. She owed it to the nameless faces of generations, to the victims whose stories, typically dismissed and mocked, deserved their rightful spotlight. Her work, complicated and vast, aimed at a single goal: to rewrite the way the system interacted with people of diverse backgrounds and identities. She saw that the law should serve as a weapon of protection, not as a tool of towering domination over those who were already powerless. Sadly, her experiences and battles as a lawyer had prepared her for the unimaginable, the insidious rot buried deep in the core of a justice system that, when it faltered, too often did so from the top down. And so, when the time came for her to don the mantle of judge, a role in which some regarded authority as infallible, she took her seat with a singular objective: accountability for all. It was a historic endeavor, forcing open the eyes of those too comfortable in their superiority, reminding each and every person who entered that courtroom that no one was above the law. No one was too powerful to be brought under its impartial gaze. She did not care for status or the sway of the influential or how much airtime or fame one might have going into the proceedings. Serafina's only concern in her courtroom was the pure, unwavering search for the truth and the firm belief that no soul should ever feel that lack of justice was their fate. She demonstrated this loudly with every ruling, overturning convictions that had been rooted in bias, exposing the deep-seated corruption within high-profile cases, and, perhaps most memorably, facing down corrupt officials who had once thought they were impervious to scrutiny and judgment. In judge after judge and case after case, Serafina's name became synonymous with fairness, righteousness, and, to some, the very future of a judiciary that could no longer afford to ignore the imperfections and inequalities of its previous iterations. She taught the land that no power, whether earned through force, wealth, or influence, was exempt from holding its actions to the bright light of scrutiny. Yet, for all the battles won, for all the vindications and triumphs of justice, she knew full well the price of her victory. Though publicly praised as a warrior for justice, she faced a treacherous backlash from the system tucked beneath a veil of respectability. But Serafina Calderón was no stranger to adversity. A woman who had persevered through the clipped judgments of others, she steadied herself against every attempt to obscure her vision or dismiss her purpose. Her legacy stood not just in the monumental cases those who followed would study and cite, but in the shifts in hearts and minds she nurtured through example, through direct, passionate action, through collaboration with incarcerated and marginalized individuals. She led experimentations on restorative justice meant to heal, not punish, communities. Serafina ensured that stories of racial violence, the kind society tried to sweep from public view, took center stage within her courtroom. For Serafina, every space she entered was an act of resistance, a reminder to the world that laws carry human consequences, especially when decisions impact the abandoned or forgotten races who suffered their stories unheard. America had long ignored these forgotten populations, left behind because access to power made their struggles invisible. Serafina reminded the world that an individual's appearance, their skin color, or their socioeconomic background didn't lessen their value toward understanding and claiming their rightful position in society. She urged her community that no one, no matter their race, deserved to fear walking the streets or to endure hostile reprimands simply because they were born with different skin colors. Discrimination should never exist, and when it does, it's not just tolerated, it should be eradicated, weeded out, and shattered through dedication to resilience. She built a future where those unable to rise before now stood beside her. Unbowed together within a revolution meant to rid it of bigotry. Serafina's immense impact began to appear even more tangible in social change. Global movements to rebuke racial inequality developed under her leadership. With every press release, every community meeting she called, sending waves of radical understanding in workplaces, communities, and state houses, her work popularized the essential framework of dignity as a birthright, asserting it for every life, regardless of racial barriers, and the urgency of the follow-up work to ensure it. Within months of taking office, her influence bled through, swaying organizations to consider the realities of systematic oppression, educating the next generation of lawyers, and planting a far-reaching understanding that this process was far from over. While some viewed Serafina's actions with disdain, from offended elitists who did not see her insistence on transparency as proper law practice, her dedication transformed laws. By vocally backing young activists and supporting their bold ideals, she actively created avenues to move forward into true revolution, including historic court decisions nudging close the punitive system and swelling up amplifying reform through the judicial systems. Serafina never wanted to look for titles or fame. She merely dedicated her existence to modeling justice. She urged those who might vacillate between apathy and accountability to stand firm and be the driving force against oppression, pushing forward even when institutional powers aimed to roadblock truth pursuit. At the moment her accomplishments exceeded boundaries. She quietly nodded to help thrive, empowering future generations to maintain resilience. In the end, Judge Serafina Calderón's legacy is a clarion representation against racial suppression, forever inspiring an unobservable wave consequence worldwide reshaped hope. Judge Serafina Calderón's story is one of extraordinary resilience, moral authority, and unwavering commitment to fairness that has transformed her community and left an indelible legacy for future generations. Rising from the depths of adversity in a system designed to hold her back, she defied every expectation and shattered every barrier imposed by injustice and prejudice, emerging as a symbol of hope and a champion for the oppressed. Throughout her illustrious career on the bench, Judge Calderón demonstrated that the true measure of justice lies not in the rigid application of laws but in the compassionate understanding of human experience. And her rulings, imbued with wisdom and empathy, consistently reflected her deep belief that every individual deserves respect, dignity, and an equal opportunity to thrive. Her tireless work in reforming outdated legal practices and exposing the corruption that had long plagued the judicial system earned her the admiration of countless citizens who had been marginalized and silenced by years of systemic discrimination. And her efforts led to significant policy changes that reformed the way justice was administered in her community. Through her groundbreaking decisions, she dismantled the oppressive structures that had once held sway over the lives of the disenfranchised, paving the way for a more inclusive and equitable society where the voices of the previously unheard could finally be celebrated and where fairness became a guiding principle in every aspect of public life. In every courtroom where she presided, Judge Calderón was more than just an arbiter of law. She was a beacon of moral clarity whose every word and action resonated with the pain of those who had been wronged and the promise of redemption for those who had been cast aside by a biased system. Her legacy is enshrined not only in the legal precedents she established but also in the transformed lives of the people who, through her benevolence, found the courage to stand up against oppression and demand the respect they were rightfully owed. As the years have passed, the impact of her work has continued to ripple through the community, inspiring a new generation of legal professionals, activists, and ordinary citizens to take up the mantle of justice and to fight relentlessly for a society where every person is treated with fairness and humanity. In recognition of her monumental contributions, community centers, scholarships, and public forums have been established in her name. ensuring that her vision of a just society endures as a source of inspiration and guidance for all who seek to challenge the status quo and to build a future founded on the principles of equality and accountability. Judge Calderón's influence has transcended the boundaries of the courtroom, reaching into the hearts and minds of those who have long suffered under the weight of injustice. And her story serves as a powerful reminder that one person's unwavering dedication to truth and fairness can change the course of history. Today, as we reflect on her remarkable achievements, we are reminded that her legacy is not merely a chapter in a history book but a living, breathing testament to the enduring power of resilience and the transformative potential of compassion. Every ruling she made, every case she presided over, became a stepping stone toward a brighter, more equitable future, and her relentless pursuit of justice has laid the foundation for a community that values integrity over corruption, empathy over indifference, and the inherent worth of every human being above all else. As you follow this story and witness the unfolding of Judge Serafina Calderón's legacy, I urge you to press the like button on our channel, to share this tale of courage and perseverance with your friends and family, and to join us in celebrating the indomitable spirit of a woman who dared to challenge the forces of oppression and whose life's work continues to inspire us all. Your support is not just an act of appreciation, it is a commitment to the ongoing fight for justice. A promise that we will never allow the voices of the marginalized to be silenced. And a recognition that the legacy of Judge Calderón is a call to action for every individual who believes in the power of truth, fairness, and the transformative potential of human compassion. In the years to come, let her story serve as a rallying cry, a reminder that even in the face of overwhelming adversity, hope can triumph, and that each one of us has the power to effect change by standing up for what is right and by championing the cause of justice in our own unique ways. It is through such collective efforts that we can honor the memory of Judge Serafina Calderón, ensuring that her extraordinary legacy endures as a beacon of light for future generations, guiding them toward a world where the rule of law is balanced by an unwavering commitment to human dignity and where every voice, regardless of its origin, is heard and valued as an integral part of our shared existence. Her journey is a testament to the fact that real change is possible when courage meets determination and when individuals refuse to accept the status quo in the face of injustice. Let us then, with hearts full of hope and minds resolute in the pursuit of equity, continue the work she started, ensuring that her legacy is not forgotten but celebrated in every act of kindness, every stand against discrimination, and every effort to build a society that truly reflects the values of fairness and accountability. As we honor her memory, we must also acknowledge the sacrifices she made and the battles she fought, battles that were often waged in the shadows of a system rife with corruption and indifference, yet fought with the brilliance of a spirit that would not be broken. Her determination to bring about meaningful reform, even when faced with insurmountable odds, is a beacon to us all, urging us to carry forward her vision in our daily lives and to work tirelessly to create a future that is just, inclusive, and compassionate. In celebrating her achievements, we recognize that her legacy is interwoven with the very fabric of our community. A legacy that calls on each of us to be vigilant, to speak out against injustice, and to support one another in our collective quest for a better tomorrow. It is a legacy that continues to inspire, to uplift, and to remind us that every act of courage, no matter how small, contributes to the collective strength of a society that is committed to the ideals of justice and equality. So, I implore you, dear viewers and members of our community, to join us in this celebration of resilience and moral authority by pressing the like button on our channel, sharing this story with those who may need a spark of inspiration, and contributing your voice to a movement that is dedicated to preserving the memory of Judge Serafina Calderón, a woman whose life has been a testament to the power of justice, whose legacy is a symbol of hope for the oppressed, and whose example continues to guide us all on the path to a more just and equitable world. Judge Calderón's story is one of extraordinary resilience and transformative impact. Her unwavering commitment to justice reformed outdated systems and ignited a wave of change that lifted countless lives from despair to hope. And her influence is evident in every corner of our community, from the revitalized public institutions to the empowered voices of those who once suffered in silence. As she broke through barriers and challenged the entrenched powers of a corrupt system, Her actions resonated deeply with people from all walks of life, inspiring a generation to believe that true change is possible when we stand together, united by the common goal of building a society that honors the dignity and worth of every human being. Her legacy, marked by landmark rulings, community initiatives, and a relentless pursuit of fairness, has become a guiding light for all who aspire to create a world where justice prevails over oppression and where the voices of the marginalized are not only heard but celebrated. The transformation she catalyzed in the judicial system and the broader society is a testament to her vision of a just world, a world where every individual, regardless of their background, is given the opportunity to flourish, and where the rule of law is tempered by compassion and guided by the principles of equity and respect. The ripple effects of her work are evident in the lives of those who have benefited from the reforms she championed. And her spirit continues to inspire new initiatives aimed at dismantling the remnants of systemic injustice. Her life and work have become a living testament to the transformative power of resilience and the profound impact that one dedicated individual can have on the course of history, inspiring us to build upon her achievements and to carry forward her vision of a society rooted in fairness, compassion, and unwavering accountability. In closing, let us commit ourselves to honoring Judge Serafina Calderón's legacy by actively participating in the ongoing struggle for justice, by supporting reforms that promote equality, and by standing together as a community that refuses to tolerate injustice. For it is through our united efforts that her vision of a just, inclusive, and compassionate society will continue to flourish. It is a legacy that continues to inspire and uplift, reminding us that every act of courage strengthens a society committed to justice. And by uniting our voices we can overcome divides and build a future that honors every individual's dignity with unwavering resolve. Judge Calderón's story is a beacon for the marginalized, a powerful narrative urging us to stand for what is right and to believe that together we can create a world where justice and equality are real for all of humanity. Her reforms have created a more transparent and equitable legal system, protecting the rights of the marginalized and celebrating voices once silenced, as community initiatives now flourish, proving her transformative impact that continue to inspire lasting, positive change every day. Her journey is not only a legal triumph but a story of sacrifice and conviction, inspiring a generation to fight for just world where dignity is cherished and kindness prevails. As we honor Judge Serafina Calderón's legacy, let us commit to carrying forward her vision by engaging in our communities and advocating for justice, ensuring her spirit guides us to an equitable society. Judge Calderón's legacy, a testament to the power of truth and unwavering integrity, challenges us to build upon her achievements and to ensure that every individual, regardless of their background, is given the opportunity to live with dignity and fairness, thereby creating a future where justice is not just an ideal, but a lived reality for all. Her reforms have reshaped the legal landscape and ignited a passion for social change that continues to resonate in every corner of our community. From the revitalized public institutions to the empowered voices of those who once suffered in silence. And her story serves as a perpetual reminder that justice, when pursued with heart and conviction, can transform lives and heal deep-seated wounds. As we celebrate her enduring legacy, let us also remember that her journey was marked by personal sacrifice and the relentless struggle against a system steeped in injustice. And in doing so, we honor not only her memory but also the countless individuals who found strength in her example and who continue to fight for a world where every person is valued and every injustice is challenged. Her life and work have become a living testament to the transformative power of resilience and the profound impact that one dedicated individual can have on the course of history, inspiring us to build upon her achievements and to carry forward her vision of a society rooted in fairness, compassion, and unwavering accountability. In closing, let us commit ourselves to honoring Judge Serafina Calderón's legacy by actively participating in the ongoing struggle for justice, by supporting reforms that promote equality, and by standing together as a community that refuses to tolerate injustice. For it is through our united efforts that her vision of a just, inclusive, and compassionate society will continue to flourish. Please, if you believe in the power of justice and wish to see this legacy endure, press the like button on our channel to support Judge Serafina Calderón's enduring mission. And let your voice be heard as we unite to create a future where every act of courage is celebrated and every individual is empowered to stand against injustice.